Hey, welcome back everybody to episode number 24 of Kerbal Space Program Interstellar Quests. Now we're doing a career playthrough and we're playing with the promised worlds of KSP 2. Now I recently learned that KSP 2 is getting on a bit of a revival thanks to the modern community, but we'll stick to KSP 1 on this one. And to kick things off, you are listening to a very loud launch. In this case of a Goliath mail rocket. This is the Goliath A3 and it's launching on Hyperion, and you may remember the previous Hyperion launches that we did. We had quite a bit of Delta V left, so we've reduced everything. We have very small boosters this time, just enough to kick us off the path and get us going and look at all the toxic fuel being burned up, speeding up and getting to orbit. Yes, the first stage of the Hyperion is actually powerful enough to punch at least 20 tons into lower Kerbal orbit and then get back safely. So that is what we're going to do. We're not going to push this one all the way to the Mun like we did with the previous two space tugs. Yeah, because these are nuclear space tugs, which is phase 2 of the roadmap is based basically around nuclear propulsion and getting to places fast, which we are finally going to put to crude use. Yes, we are launching Beagle A1, and that explosion that you just saw not just took out the launch tower, it also took out the airlock on the craft hidden in the fairing. For some reason the fairing is completely intact. There's KSP for you. Fairings are not really things. I think they don't exist in real life. Well, they obviously fairings do, but KSP fairings have weird physics. Anyway, we're getting all the way to orbit, and we're doing a direct intercept. So we are heading straight for the Beagle space, the Goliath stage. So they're supposed to meet up at almost the right point, and I think I nailed this one. We're very, very close. We can do a brief intercept. Something like a kilometer away. Yeah, there it is. There is a Goliath, and of course it was a lot of fanatically small burns and leaping around the planet until we got daylight. But we have catched up, and we are mating the Goliath transfer stage to the Beagle, and the Beagle is going to be our first interplanetary manned spacecraft. Obviously, we've been to quite a few of the planets in the Kerbal Solar System with unmanned probes. But we are ready to send a crew, and we're going to send a crew over to Eve. Now, in one of the previous episodes, we landed a rover on Eve, and then the whole game crashed after discovering life on the planet. And obviously, it sparked quite a debate back at Kerbin to found microbial life and plant life on a new planet. But also the fact that our rover got lost, at least that's the game narrative we're going with. I mean that maybe we should not be sending unmanned craft to the surface of this planet, but we do want to know what's going on there, so we're going to send a manned crew over there. But before they can go there, we need to beef up this spacecraft with some more Delta V. We definitely need to repair the airlock. So we're sending them over to the Mun, and we're sending them over to a very special place on the Mun. So obviously this one's not going to land on our Mun base. This one's going to a special place, which I've not shown you before, but I'll do that in a moment. I'll keep the suspense up for now. There we go, we're doing our translunar insertion born. And now a little bit of rendezvousing and we should be done. Meanwhile, we still have this Hyperion booster in orbit, and previously we've tried using parachutes and tried landing them and failed at all occasions to land them at our sea-based landing platform, which is an old converted oil rig, which I made very beautiful with Kerbal statics and Kerbal constructs, but then landed like something like 2 to 3 kilometers away from it, so you were never able to completely see what I had created. And unfortunately today will be no difference in that respect, because it is nighttime. Yes, I planned it really poorly, but I do love the plasma on the booster. You can see me trying to figure out, hey, am I going in the right direction? This is the Firefly mod. It is awesome. Now, breaking the sound barrier. I think this is Mach 2 that we're flying down to the planet, blowing through the upper parts of the atmosphere, but thick enough to slow us down. And we're approaching Mach 1 or Mach 2. I'm never quite sure which sonic boom is what. Fingers back one, you can see the lights of our platform. And that's about everything you can see. You can see me trying to figure out if we're going to get close to it. But the lower parts of the atmosphere are quite thick, so yeah, we don't have really the fuel for hovering to the right spot. So we're landing once again in the ocean. Crushing. Anyway, next up is Zephereus, which is taking out the launch platform. Which you didn't see. You didn't see that happening. It is taking off. Zephereus is of course our lunar shuttle. And if you've been watching For All Mankind, I think it was season 3, where they were using shuttles to go to the moon. And, the ordinary spatial obviously would never been able to make that. You would need to recharge it somewhere, and Scott Manley had a whole video about it. Actually, you might be able to get there, especially if you hang on to this big orange tank, which is exactly what we're doing with Zephereus. We slammed an additional engine on there, which allows us to go to a 2-engine configuration once the tank is almost empty. And that's good in order to offset the position of the engines compared to the center of mass. But you'll still wobble a lot by the end of the burn, and we'll need to make some small corrections, but that's okay. Yes, Zephereus has enough delta V to go into orbit, do the transmitter insertion, get in orbit around the moon, and make a landing when she is not carrying any payload. But today she is carrying some payloads. There's a couple of upgrades that we need to do, and we're bringing over a crew. And not just any crew, like this is the crew that is going all the way over to Eve. So on board of Zephereus are Valentina Kerman, Bob Kerman, and Samlo Kerman, which are going to be the crew to go to Eve. But we also have Scott and Aldeberry as a maintenance crew that is going to fly Zephereus and then do some maintenance on the space stations. Yeah, here we go. Look at those beautiful. This is the 2 engines I was talking about. Now we can let go of the nice orange tank to get even more clutter and debris around Kerbin and make our way towards the Mun. We're now completely relying on internal fuel tanks, which have plenty of delta V to get into orbit. Here we go. You may notice we're a little bit higher than we normally are when entering lunar orbit, and that's for a particular reason. In the cargo bay we are now carrying a airlock/docking module. We're carrying a battery module, which we will need in a moment. It's part of an additional delivery. Of course, a new airlock and a special delivery that the Beagle spacecraft couldn't bring on. So we are approaching my best kept secret for you, which is Tsiolkovsky Station. So I'm not gonna share everything I do in KSP in a recording anymore, because it's just way too much. I've been working really hard on Munbase Alpha and a corresponding station in orbit, and I promise I will give you a tour at least of the Munbase, because I think it turned out really nice. But it has evolved, and we have put a space station in orbit. We're capable of manufacturing large amounts of fuel on the Mun, as well as spacecraft, and you've seen me launch spacecraft from the Mun. But the fuel is it's requiring a fuel depot. And Tsiolkovsky was, of course, the famous Russian physicist. I think he's a physicist. I think he was a school teacher. Anyway, he came up with the rocket equation, basically telling that for every ton or kilogram of payload mass that you want to bring to orbit, you also have to bring up fuel. And the fuel also has mass, so you need fuel to bring up the fuel. And you need fuel to bring up that fuel. Anyway, that escalates quite quickly, so having a depot in orbit makes sense, and that's what you're looking at. Tsiolkovsky Station is a kind of a midpoint in the way that Gateway Station was intended by NASA. Ours is in a different kind of orbit, and it has something special. It has a mass driver receptor, so we're able to shoot up fuel from the Mun at relatively low cost, and then fill those big beautiful tanks on the station, which can then be used to refuel spacecraft, like the Beagle, which has been docked to the spacecraft on the left hand side. There we go. And we can also now use it to refuel Zephereus. It's gonna need a little bit fuel to get back to Kerbin. Not much. It could probably do on its own reserves, but well. What Tsiolkovsky Station also have is an orbital drone, which is basically a huge monopropellant tank, which allows me to move containers and craft around. And in preparation of the Beagle's arrival, the MUN team, or the team on the MUN, has been working hard on creating disposable fuel canisters. I guess that's the kind of things you could build early on the MUN. Not very complex, like nuclear craft and stuff like that, but like simple tanks. Sure, like you'll be able to get silicium and aluminum oxide from the MUN. At some point, you should, and iron ore, like there's a ton of iron ore. So you should be able to build structures like this at some point. Easy, simple structures to begin with. Yeah, and the Beagle is ready. Well, almost ready. At least it's ready from a Delta V point of view. It probably has got way too much Delta V, but hey. Especially for manned missions, I'd rather use way too much than way too little. We're going to park the drone back at the station. And you can also see that we have a variety of docking ports. We have the large senior ones. We have the standard docking ports. We have these small junior docking ports with the clamps that we used in the very beginning of our space journey, because they're so easy to align. Well, not easy, but once you get them aligned, they're stuck in this position, which makes it predictable. I think it is the word I'm looking for. Here we go. Dog, come on. Here we are. And so with the fuel part and the canisters on their way, it is time to do some EVA repairs. And we brought Alderbury Kerman, our seasoned engineer, who has been to the MUN, who's been to the space station. And he's here to perform his magic. Because when we built the space station, yes, we did put some batteries on it, but not enough. So we're also here to bring up some additional battery constructs. And you can see me flicking through some of the menus, trying to figure out what the correct button is to put stuff on there. But here we go. We're adding a couple of simple standard battery packs. And we got a huge battery pack that we're going to put somewhere else on the station. But this seems like a nice place to put stuff on. Here we go. Yeah, the station has been built around near future construction parts, which allow for both manned constructs as well as some tanks, and some really nice way to expand the station in the future. So we got a lot of docking ports. These orthogonal docking ports will be used to expand the station with fuel tanks. Basically big fuel tanks, I guess. Once we get access to different kinds of fuel. So it's currently storing liquid fuel, monopropellant, oxidizer, and liquid hydrogen. That's why we need also the battery. So for the dark side of the moon, it's helpful to keep everything nice and chill. This is the new airlock. And I really like how the Beagle came together. Later I discovered actually we could use this small docking area on the side also to at least get into the craft, maybe not get out. But regardless. Another thing we have on the station are these pallets where we have the capacity to add all kinds of equipment like docking ports and other side of materials. And Alderbury has switched on the light because they moved to the dark side of the moon, and he's moving over a minor junior docking port towards the Beagle, because after we launched the Beagle we decided that, well, that going to Eve is really nice, but giving the narrative of having life on the planet and not wanting to disturb the planet's life, we may want to visit one of the moons, or the moon of Eve, which is Gilly. And Gilly is very lightweight, so we don't need a big lander to go there. We need something light, and Juggernoop on the Kerbal platform came up with a design that I really like. So I stole and copied that a little bit and then changed it a little bit around, and turned that into what we're calling the Munner Flyer. And the Munner Flyer is a device that I've been testing it on the MUN, and it's really nice to fly around there. This is the upgraded version with a lot of science instruments. And Alderbury is taking it for a spin, flying around the station. The upper hand side, you can see the most lander, which is basically our Munner orbit to surface transport, or most. Yeah, so this is our new spacecraft that will be able to land on the MUN, get refueled and get back up here to the station. It has something like 800 meters per second, so it can reach the station from almost probably any kind of inclination. And it's also designed with the second MUN base in mind. So we found a really nice spot with Kerbin hanging over the horizon, and we would love to use that part as a secondary MUN base, and I've tried to build kind of a railroad or road system towards it, but it's something like 37 kilometers. I'm not sure if people would actually build a road or rail system on the MUN for that kind of distances, or if they just hop over there. Like, there's no air, you already need a spacecraft to get to the MUN anyway. So yeah, that makes more sense. We'll see that in some upcoming episodes. For now, everything is done, and the team on the Zephereus can start heading home. Well, they'll hang out a little bit around the MUN and do some observations and maybe follow the Beagle spacecraft as it makes its way towards Eve. For now, it's undocking, and Scott Kerman and Aldebaran Kerman are preparing for their journey home. Meanwhile, Valentina Kerman has taken command of the Beagle. Together with Bob Kerman, our most experienced scientist that we have, and Samlo Kerman. Samlo Kerman, of course, being one of the lead engineers on our MUN base. So this was the most experienced team, and they're going to use some novel new technology like this rotating ring. And the reasoning behind it is that they're going to travel to Eve. They're not going to land on Eve. They might land on Gilly, but Gilly has like neglectable gravity. And I'm not sure when they're coming back, but it's going to be more than a year. Here we have the station, and you can see the mass driver receptor pointing towards the MUN. The people at Zephereus observing what's happening over there, and the Beagle getting ready for departure. Anyway, what was I talking about? I was talking about gravity. So the journey towards Eve without landing would mean you spend a lot of time there, and as you spend so much time there, your bone density will probably decrease. Well, maybe not for Kerbals, but for people it would definitely be a thing. So we decided that we would put a gravity ring on this particular spacecraft. Both nuclear engines are firing up, and the first thing to do is a very relatively short burn. We're getting out of orbit from the MUN. Of course, the Beagle has been completely refueled after its trip to the MUN, so it has something like 3,500–4,000 meters per second. Yeah, I'll give you a bigger tour of the station once we are in a little bit different situation, because with the spinning ring, you get flung all over the place. Yeah, but that's for a different episode, I think, because we are making our way towards Earth in the Zephereus. The crew of the Beagle still has to wait for its departure window, but Zephereus can safely return home. And remember the last time we decided to first go into orbit of Kerbin, burning all the energy and then using the monopropellant to actually get back. That was in episode 19, if I'm correct. And we really struggled, so we decided that we were going to do a heat shield test this time. We are not going to burn any fuel to get into orbit. Instead, we're going to rely on the shuttle's heat shield to bleed off all that energy. Now, in real life, that would never have been possible, despite what For All Mankind makes you believe. The design of the shuttle is based on ceramic tiles, and those tiles would not be able to bleed off that much energy that quickly, so they would probably burn up the metal infrastructure below it. This is also why Starship is using a different kind of tiles. That's kind of similar. The Orion spacecraft is of course using ablative shields, just like Apollo missions did. It's easier to get shed off the extra heat by burning away actual material, but it takes more time to refurbish. Which is why people picked tiles for the shuttle. Not that it was an easy thing to refurbish the shuttle. That actually was quite a disappointment in times of turnaround. Nevertheless, we did a couple of passes, bled off some speed, and now we are on the right angle. Well, not on the right angle yet, but we are in the right place. We've lost enough speed to land in our next iteration. And as we fly back down, we're going to line up just before we hit the atmosphere. And we're going to get rid of some inclination. So obviously we're heading back down. You can see me look at the orbits once more. It's kind of a bit of guesswork, because you bleed off so much energy while you're descending into the atmosphere that MagJab is not really good in predicting what the final orbit is going to be. So it's a bit of trial and error to figure out where you are. I think I did 3 or 4 passes before we had lowered our apoapsis so far that we, yeah, see, here we go. So it's supposed to be 3 different passes, but yeah, we made it all the way down. And now we need to change our angle a little bit. So we are lining up for the desert runway. Desert runway being 4.8 kilometers, which is our best bet to put the plane down in one piece. Last time we came down something like 100 kilometers before that airport, which turned out to be a bit of a problem. Unfortunately, we didn't damage everything, but I would rather land on the runway. Yeah, Kerbal Space Program is a bit weird with that, because I would expect to be able to really land on the runway and then get a full recovery, which I'm not. So I'm only getting a full recovery in funds when I land at KSC, and even when I land at Desert Airport, I'm not getting a full refund on that part. But yeah, I think that can be helped. Maybe there's some setting where you can make the other ports just as valuable as the Kerbal Space Center, or you have to accept that you're dragging the space plane all the way over from there. As I was editing the footage, I didn't realize I had so many passes going through the atmosphere and lining everything up. But it does give you beautiful images of sunrises and sunsets. And it gives me the opportunity to talk a little bit about the mod that I'm using here. So this is Cormorant Space Technologies, and they have not only made a great space shuttle mod, but they've also added some parts in that resemble a renewed space shuttle. So you can build Buran, you can build a shuttle, but you can also build this particular type of space plane, which I really like. I like the way the cockpit is shaped. And I also like the fact that in an emergency, so if I press backspace, the command section will actually eject. It doesn't have separate motors. It used to have separate motors in the mod, but they were like horrifically expensive, so I decided to remove them. Reasoning being that as you'd be using this, you would probably already be in a ballistic arc, and we're not using it as an escape system. If the shuttle goes, it goes. But if it breaks up under in descent, you could press backspace. It would separate the front section of the space plot and use a parachute to land the capsule and save the crew. And those were things that were actually considered for the real space shuttle, but never quite came about. Yes, we're in flying brick mode, which means we have to point the nose downwards and pick up some speed until we get down to the more thicker parts of the atmosphere, because that's where the delta wind starts to kick in. And there you can see in the distance, you can see the runway pay up. I'm still quite high, and for some reason my little green light turned red. Yeah, that's really weird. So that's probably not how it's supposed to work. Anyway, I love to fly with atmospheric autopilot, but for some reason this plane really fights it. So I have to fly it by manual SAS, and I'm not really good at that part. I'm not good at planes anyway, but it makes it extra complex, and you get this wobbling effect. However, this runway is so long that once you get the right angle, you can sort of lift the nose, bleed off some of the speed, get it down there, and that works actually really right. And yes, the RCS is actually capable of keeping the nose up even as we land, which is probably not something you should be doing. Here we go, another safe landing. Meanwhile, the crew of the Beagle 1 is approaching its trans ejection, and it's firing up its both nuclear, its twin nuclear engines, and starts to burn off all that fuel that we stored all over the place. I'm clicking through all the tanks to see how much of it we have actually burned. There were some problems with the priority of the fuel tanks, and at the beginning I was draining it from the wrong tanks, but now we're doing a great job, and the first tank is almost empty, which means it's time to let go of it. Well, Looks a bit like a dangerous maneuver, which it probably is, but hey, it's Kerbal Space Program. This works fine. This was as designed. If we calculated everything correctly, and I think I have, we will see by the end of the video if I have, we should be able to ditch both tanks and then have completed our trans-eve injection, giving us about 2.5 to 0.8 thousand meters per second for a nice eve injection, an inclination change to get to Gilly, getting in orbit of Gilly, which can take something like 800 meters per second to actually get there, and then the return burn and getting safely back to Kerbin. And we've got a backup, we've got a heat shield on the top of the craft, which I hope we're not going to use, or may not need to use, but it's kind of an effort to do some aero braking as we return. I'm not going to aero brake at Eve, that's way too dangerous. But here we are, on our way to our first interplanetary mission with a crew. I have another one of those for you in the next episode, but we'll do that in the next episode. Until then,